All right, welcome everybody to Prestream for Monster Monday. My name is DM Galabond. It is Monday, the 23rd of May, 2022. Hope everybody had a good day, good weekend. Getting my monitor set up here. All right, you are listening, as always, to the sounds of Sirenscape in the background, and we are going to pretty soon get ready for our discussion of the night at the top of the hour. Today's topic is a monster from Monsters of the Multiverse. It's called the Sorrowsworn. Monster that is newly introduced to 5th edition, although it has existed in other editions before. Alright. You know, these musicians here in this friendly tavern, they're wonderful. I really like them, but I don't know why when we gather for our Monster Monday, why they put us right over here next to the stage. So, come with me, grab your drinks, everybody. Let's go over near the fire. Yeah, this is a little quieter over here. Yeah, that's it. Yeah, grab a seat. Have a sit. Sit down. All right, and welcome. Welcome, everybody, to Monster Monday. I am DM Galabond. This is Monster Monday, and tonight on Monster Monday, we are going to be talking about the Sorrowsworn. The Sorrowsworn are a monster that originated in 3rd edition as a demon and changed in 4th edition to a creature of the Shadowfell. And in 5th edition, it's still a creature of the Shadowfell, but you'll see every time they get introduced, there's more permutations of them. So we will talk about their history, we'll talk about how they've changed, and how you can use them in your campaigns, and then even think about some ways maybe that we might want to reskin these monsters. Alright, so the Sorrowsworn. This is a picture from 5th edition of the Wretched Sorrowsworn. Cute little things, aren't they? Just look at that lovely little mouth, all full of teeth. So many teeth. All right, the Sorrowsworn were introduced in 3rd edition D&D in the Monster Manual 3 as a kind of demon. It's a very powerful foe, projecting an aura of intense personal loss that requires a DC 26 will save to overcome, or else you suffer -2 penalties on pretty much all of your D20 rolls. Attack rolls, saving throws, ability checks, and skill checks. And it's a pretty nasty customer. Now in 4th edition, coming out in Manual of the Planes, where they talked about where monsters fit in the cosmology of 4th edition, the Sorrowsworn changed and they became a creature of the Shadowfell. In fact, they're one of the main denizens and guardians of that plane. Now, some Sorrowsworn were employed as elite personal guards of the Raven Queen, and others are, and I quote, the custodians of decay, heralds of endings, and the harbingers of doom. Now, the ones in the service of the Raven Queen would sometimes be sent as holy assassins after powerful mortals that had cheated death. DMs, are you starting to get ideas of how you might use Sorrowsworn in your campaign? I know when I read that, I was like, ooh, okay, all right. I see where you're going here. Ideas. Okay, in the 4th edition Monster Manual, it introduced several varieties of Sorrowsworn. And again, all of these were fairly powerful creatures you would not want to meet in a dark alley. And now we come to 5th edition, and in Monsters of the Multiverse, we have Sorrowsworn once again. And just as we went from 1 Sorrowsworn in 3rd to 3 Sorrowsworn in 4th edition, now from 3 Sorrowsworn in 4th, we go to 5 different Sorrowsworn. I think it's only 5 different Sorrowsworn in 5th edition. And we have more varieties. We also have a much broader range of CRs. So the CRs of Sorrowsworn can be a challenge for players all the way from low levels. So, for instance, these Wretched Sorrowsworn are CR 1/4 monsters. And you can have individual versions of Sorrowsworn that are a nice challenge all the way up into tier 3, because there are some Sorrowsworn that are CR 13 monsters. And then if you put groups of Sorrowsworn together, you could make a combat challenge for a party all the way into tier 4. So we'll look at these monsters by edition, break down their mechanics, and then imagine how we can use them and reskin them for our own purposes. All right, so we're going to take a look at the description, lore, and tactics of the Sorrowsworn in 3rd edition. And this is how the Sorrowsworn demon appeared in the 3rd edition Monster Manual 3. So this emaciated figure stands between 12 and 15 feet tall and weighs about 500 pounds. Its skin is always a dusky black, and bat-like wings protrude from its back. His face is a skeletal mockery of utter mourning, and 2 short, twisted horns sprout from the front of its high brow. A wide maw and hooked claws clutching a massive polearm only add to this picture of lethality. Sorrowsworn demons speak Abyssal, Celestial, Common, Dwarven, Elven, Giant, Goblin, and Infernal. And so that's the description of the monster. Now, in terms of lore, these are creatures of loss. Sorrowsworn demons appear only after a war or battle has finished. They prey on the feelings of great sorrow that permeate a region after the loss of its youth and its promise. Favored haunts of Sorrowsworn demons include mass graves, orphanages, hospitals, and the homes of those who have lost loved ones to battle. Wherever one can find the greatest concentration of souls suffering from loss, one can also find a lurking Sorrowsworn demon, encouraging those feelings and sating itself on them. DMs? DMs? More ideas? Yeah. Good, good, good. I like the way you're thinking. All right. So then they give you some battle tactics of the Sorrowsworn demon. Sorrowsworn demon preys on the weakness of others, and his tactics reflect this preference. Nearly always strikes from hiding, attempting to bring its aura of loss to bear on as many foes as possible. It then uses its mind-reading ability to determine what its foes most fear losing, then uses its whispers of loss to further weaken its opponents before ripping into them. Sorrowsworn demons' natural weapons, as well as any weapons it wields, are treated as chaotic aligned and evil aligned for the purposes of overcoming damage reduction. Sorrowsworn normally attacks using its power attack feat, taking a -5 penalty on its attack rolls and gaining a +5 bonus on damage rolls, or +10 damage if it's using its glaive. All right, so that is the Sorrowsworn demon from 3rd edition. Interesting ideas about origins, where they're found, and those types of things. So this is all stuff. This lore from the older editions is all stuff that kind of gets lost over, and they don't always bring forward to 5th edition. So it's useful to understand these things. So if you want to take these monsters and put them into your homebrew campaigns, you have an idea thematically where they would slot in and how you might introduce them. All right, now this is a picture of the Sorrowsworn from 4th edition. Now, interestingly enough, there's 3 different kinds of Sorrowsworn in 4E, but in the monster manual, they only ever give us one picture of them. So, no creature better reflects the sinister aspects of the Shadowfell than do the Sorrowsworn. Imbued with the power of death, the Sorrowsworn are the custodians of decay, heralds of endings, harbingers of doom. Except in rare circumstances, they do not take part in the conflicts on the plane and are disinterested guardians at best, as the Death Giants can testify. Death Giants? Wait a minute, Death Giants? Ooh. Okay. Except, although many find service in the ranks of the Raven Queen, indeed the goddess creates the Sorrowsworn from Shatterkai and elevates a handful of them to serve as her Raven Knights elite. Most are independent and work to ensure the cycle of life continues as it always has. All right, now, Shatterkai. Those are the Dusk Elves, the Dark Elves that come, or not the Dark Elves, the Dusk Elves, the elves that are native to the Shadowfell. So, if you have a player, as a DM, if you have a player that wants to play a Shatterkai and they're having trouble with an origin story, you can sort of introduce this idea. Hey, you know, what many Shatterkai, not necessarily yours, but just as something to think about, many Shatterkai aspire to become a Sorrowsworn uh, by their dedicated service to the Raven Queen. Now, give that to the player, let them do what they will with it. Maybe they want to run with that. Maybe they want to work that into their backstory. Maybe they don't want to say, oh, no, not my character. My character would reject that and be against that. Either way, it's something you can use as a DM to then um, little threads that you can fill into your campaign that will be a tie-in for this particular character. So the Sorrowsworn do not seek out their enemies, but they are vicious when they encounter opposition. They have no capacity for mercy and fling themselves at death giants, night walkers, and any other terrible denizens whose presence contaminates the plane. The Sarasworn do not build fortresses or cities. Instead, they haunt the ruins of lost settlements and ruined death giant enclaves, long brought low by the efforts of these dire fiends. Sarasworn can also move between worlds, frequently traveling from the Shadowfell to the natural world and back again. While in the natural world, Sarasworn claim places of old grief, such as battlefields and graveyards, until that moment when they are roused to harvest a new batch of souls. All right, so that is 4th edition version of Sorrowsworn. Now, their tactics of several different varieties of Sorrowsworn and 4e, each with different ways of tormenting and destroying their prey. So we have the Sorrowsworn Soulripper, and the Soulripper is a stealthy assassin that stalks its prey and likes to attack with surprise. Typically begins with Sorrow's Rush and then uses Flutter and Strike as often as it can. And then we have the Sorrowsworn Reaper. A Reaper likes to focus on one enemy at a time, striking with its scythe. It waits until its victim is bloodied before using Reaping Blow. And then the Sorrowsworn Deathlord. A Deathlord favors hit and run tactics, phasing in and out of walls between attacks. It uses Reap and Fade as often as it can, striking with its scythe and then teleporting to a more advantageous position. So, those are the different 4th edition Sorrowsworn. And those tactics there, those are ideas that you can use to try to figure out how your Sorrowsworn might act. Now, 5th edition versions don't have all these same abilities, but if you think about the different tactics they use, well, that might be a strategy for how they're going to operate when you get them into combat. All right, now here is another Sorrowsworn from 5th edition. This is the Lost Sorrowsworn, which looks like a humanoid with 5 or 6 different arms, none of them ending in hands, but these big, huge spikes. So there are five, one, two, three, four. Yeah, there's five different Sorrowsworn in 5th edition. And we're going to look at the descriptions of each one. So we already seen the picture of the Wretched Sorrowsworn. So they're horrid little monsters. Wretched Sorrowsworn, or the Wretched, gather in packs to scout the Shadowfell for prey, or to scour the Shadowfell for prey. These desperate entities subsist on life force. When they find a creature, they surge forward to sink their fangs into their victims and drink deep. Now, the Lost Sorrowsworn, the Shadowfell turns visitors around until they become marooned in its twisted landscapes. Lost Sorrowsworn, often referred to as the Lost, are representations of the anxiety and fear people experience when they can't find their way. These Sorrowsworn appear desperate and panicked. Lost Sorrowsworn grasp at any creature they can reach. The victim experiences a flood of fear and panic as its mind buckles under the fury of this assault. The harder a victim's allies fight to break the grasp, the more the victim suffers. Now, this is some interesting stuff they've introduced, and we're going to take a look at that when we examine each one of these in detail. Then we have the Lonely Sorrowsworn. And the sorrow of isolation afflicts many creatures that lurk in the Shadowfell, but the need for companionship is never manifested more dramatically than in the Lonely Sorrowsworn, also called the Lonely. When these Sorrowsworn spot other creatures, they feel keenly the need for interaction and launch their harpoon-like arms to drag their victims closer. Then we have the Hungry Sorrowsworn, horrible creatures with grasping claws and distended jaws. Hungry Sorrowsworn, also known as the Hungry, do whatever is necessary to sate their appetites. These greedy devourers stuff their maws with flesh and drink in their victims' screams. When they finish, they lurch away while their bright eyes resume the search for something else to consume. And then we have the Angry Sorrowsworn. Relying on violence to sustain their existence, Angry Sorrowsworn, sometimes called the Angry, grow more powerful when their foes fight back. If a creature opts not to attack, though, this Sorrowsworn becomes confused and its attacks weaken. It also has two heads which bicker with each other incessantly. Very, very interesting. And here, this poor, pathetic little creature. This is the Lonely Sorrowsworn. And I think it's hilarious with this artwork. It even kind of looks like it's been crying and its mascara is running. it's it's I mean, it's horrible, but at the same time, it's almost so pathetic it's cute. So now the lore of the Sorrowsworn in 5th edition, we get just a very tiny little bit of lore. So I've supplemented that with some of the Arcana checks you were able to make in 4th edition, just to kind of give you ideas of some extra things you can throw in for your players. So the Shadowfell's pervasive melancholy sometimes gives rise to strange incarnations of the plane's bleak nature. Sorrowsworn embody the forms of suffering inherent to the shadowy landscape and visit horror on those who stumble into their midst. Each Sorrowsworn personifies a different aspect of despair or distress. And then the Sorrowsworn Arcana checks from 4th edition. Character knows the following information with a successful Arcana check. A DC 25. Although they resemble undead demons, Sorrowsworn are neither undead nor demonic. They are fragments of death incarnate, often drawn to locations where others have died in great numbers, such as battlefields. And a DC 30, many Sorrowsworn serve the Raven Queen and are tasked with slaying powerful mortals who have cheated death. A few serve other entities with power over mortality. Sorrowsworn reside in bleak lairs such as thorny pits and dank caves. Within a Sorrowsworn's abode are many shallow cavities that contain grisly trophies and remains of past victims. Each set of remains tells a more depressing story than the last. Watching over these lairs are scores of shadow ravens, which coalesce into ravenous swarms when provoked. These birds also follow their Sorrowsworn masters to recent battlefields and other places of carnage to pick at the flesh of the recently slain. And with a DC 35 check, the Sorrowsworn are the Raven Queen's protection against the inscrutable plots of independent Nightwalkers. Sorrowsworn also oppose Death Giants, once invaders from the elemental chaos, now connected to the Shadowfell, who acts against the Raven Queen's wishes. And a DC 40, heroes among the Shadar-kai and others who serve the Raven Queen without fail can ascend to the ranks of the Sorrowsworn. Doing so is one way mighty Shadar-kai can acquire the immortality their kind craves. So, again, these are some different bits of lore that you can use to kind of help figure out where you would want to introduce Sorrowsworn and how you would want them to um, manifest in your campaign. Now, this creature is kind of almost looks a little bit aquatic because of the webbed hands and everything. This is the Hungry Sorrowsworn. And Sorrowsworn in 5th edition are all monstrosities. So they're monsters in the strictest sense, frightening creatures that are not ordinary, not truly natural, almost never benign. Some are the results of magical experimentation gone awry, and others are the product of terrible curses. They defy categorization and in some sense serve as a catch-all category for creatures that don't fit into any other type. All right, and now we are going to look at the mechanical features of Sorrowsworn from the different um, sources. And we're going to start by going to the Monster Manual 3 from 3rd edition. Alright, so the Sorrowsworn Demon was a, let's see, what was its CR? It was a CR 17 monster. 297 hit points, armor class 28, initiative +7, base attack and grapple of +18, +31. Has a +2 magical glaive, and it attacks you know 4 times with that glaive, and then special attacks are of loss, spell-like abilities, special qualities, damage reduction 10, cold iron, and good. Meaning that if you have cold iron weapons or good aligned weapons, it overcomes the damage reduction. Telepathy out to 120 feet. There's all it saves, its ability scores, checks, the feats it has. The environment was the infinite layers of the abyss. Treasure, standard coins, double goods, standard items, +2 glaive. And then, so some of its abilities, the Aura of Loss, radiates feelings of intense personal loss. A creature within 30 feet makes a DC 26 will save or is overwhelmed with feelings of despair. And then they suffer that -2 penalty that we talked about. In addition to, due to the distracting nature of the aura, any affected creatures that attempt to cast spells must succeed on a concentration check, DC 20 plus spell level, to avoid losing the spell. So that means that in the 3rd edition, you didn't have to make a concentration check to maintain the spell. You had to make a concentration check to even cast the spell in the first place when you were around these guys. So the demon can suppress or activate this ability as a free will action, mind affecting ability, and the DC is charisma based. Then has different spell like abilities. Whispers of Loss. It preys on an enemy's feelings of loss, both real and projected. Engage in combat, it whispers and hisses constantly, both aloud and in the minds of the creatures that can understand it. Can intensify these whispers, focusing them as a free action each round on one target within 60 feet that can understand it. And then any creature that succumbed to both both the Sorrowsworn demon's loss and mind reading abilities takes an additional -2 penalty on any saves to resist the whispers. Future Sorrow. Sorrowsworn demon whispers of the losses to come and the futility of struggling against the inevitability of loss. The target creature is stunned for 2 rounds. This is a fear effect. Great Emptiness. Whispers of great losses of history, genocides, and other mass murders. And creature becomes confused for 5 rounds. Past losses. Describes the target creature's past losses, both real and imagined. Creature is dazed for 3 rounds as it contemplates all the losses of its life. Whispers of loss of mind affecting ability. So mind reading once per round is free action. Sorrowsworn Demon can read the mind of one opponent. This ability functions exactly as the Detect Thought spell, except that the effect is immediate. Strong Will, Masters of Manipulating Minds. Sorrowsworn Demons are in turn especially resistant to similar abilities. Telepathy. Communicate telepathically with any creature within 100 feet. And then it gives you sort of a round by round tactics and a suggestion of what it would do in every round of combat. So now all of those things, the whispers that it does and the mind reading and stuff like that, strictly speaking, those aren't necessarily abilities that the Sorrowsworn retains in 5th edition, but if you're the DM, your players don't know that. And the Sorrowsworn in your campaign, maybe they don't have mechanical attacks that stun or confuse the creature mechanically, but by golly, as the arbiter of the campaign, you know the record of every loss that this character has suffered through the entire campaign and in their backstory. Feel free to mind that and maybe have this when one of these Sorrowsworn has grappled a creature, have it whisper in the creature's ear, in the character's ear, about some devastating loss from its backstory. You know, tell it about how its parents suffered and died in that awful fire that was part of the backstory. Do that and just see how that affects your players, because that kind of thing where you can take in an intense scene of combat and just interject something super personal to the character that's involved in the combat, that's something that some players will just really love. And other players, they will just, they will not know what to do with that. In either way, it's a lot of fun for you because you get to work some of those details that your players worked very hard to create and put those into your campaign in some way and use them kind of maybe in an unexpected moment. And who knows, there might be a reaction to that leads you there, that opens up a little thread, and that little thread will allow you to write a whole new arc of your campaign that can follow a particular story along. So some of those kinds of things are really cool to do. All right, so that's 3rd edition. Now 4th edition, Sorrowsworn. We have the Sorrowsworn Soulripper, and of course, 4th edition, all the numbers and everything are kind of insane compared to the other editions because the mechanics of 4th edition were so different from the mechanics of the other editions. So there are level 25 skirmisher is the Soulripper. It's a medium shadow humanoid, armor class 39, 236 hit points. A claw attack is plus 30 to attack. Flutter and Strike. It teleports 10 squares or 50 feet, makes a claw attack, gaining combat advantage against its target. Sorrow's Rush moves up to 10 squares, makes 3 claw attacks at any point during its move, and each attack must be made against a different target. Bleak Visage is a fear, and when it has combat advantage, it deals an extra 3d6 damage on its attacks. Then we have the Sorrowsworn Reaper, which is a level 27 soldier, armor class 41, 254 hit points. The Sorrow Scythe has a plus 32 attack bonus, deals 4d10 damage, and then psychic damage. Reaping Blow, it deals the psychic damage, and the target is marked until the end of the Sorrowsworn Reaper's next turn. If the target is reduced to 0 hit points or fewer by this attack, the Sorrowsworn Reaper regains 60 hit points. So, Bleak Visage, melee and range attacks made against the Sorrowsworn Reaper take a -2 penalty to the attack roll. And then Sorrowsworn Deathlord is a level 28 lurker or leader. Mournful Whispers 1. Any enemy that starts its turn within 5 feet is dazed until the start of its next turn. Armor class 42, 204 hit points. Dark Scythe. So it reached 10 feet, plus 32 attack. Deals necrotic and psychic damage. Taurus Reap and Fade makes a Dark Scythe attack, teleports 50 feet, and then turns insubstantial until the start of its next turn. So Bleak Visage, melee and ranged attacks made against the Sorrowsworn Deathlord take a -2 penalty on the attack roll. So those were the varieties of Sorrowsworn in 4th edition. Now, I didn't detail these guys, but they talked about the Shadow Raven Swarm because those were creatures that just went along with the Sorrowsworn, and I don't think those are part of 5th edition yet, so I figured I wouldn't even put those in here. All right, now we come to 5th edition, and we go in alphabetical order, and I think it's also in descending order by CR. So the Angry Sorrowsworn is the most difficult or the toughest of the 5e Sorrowsworn. Armor class 18, 255 hit points. A very good strength and con. Average dex. Charisma dump stat. Wisdom is okay. Speaks common. Has 2 heads, and so it has advantage on saving throws against blinded, charmed, deafened, fright. Rising anger. If another creature deals damage to the Sorrowsworn, its attack rolls have advantage until the end of its next turn. First time it hits with a hook attack on its next turn, the target takes an extra 3d12 psychic damage. But on its turn, the Sorrowsworn has disadvantage on attack rolls if no other creature has dealt damage to it in the end of its last turn. Now notice, very carefully here, if no other creature, doesn't say any other effect, but no other creature. So, this is a thing that if your PCs or if your players are having trouble trying to figure out how do we stop this thing from having advantage, then maybe they can make some sort of intelligence check or some insight check or something like that, survival check or whatever, to realize that, hey, every time one of us attacks it with a weapon, it is more powerful. But maybe if we have some sort of ongoing effect and we don't damage it with a weapon, then maybe that will negate that. So the hook attack is +8 to hit and 2d12 +3 piercing damage. And it's a CR 13 monster. Hungry Sorrowsworn is a CR 11 monster. Armor class 17, 225 hit points. Again, pretty much strength and con are the primary stats. Life Hunger. If a creature within 60 feet of the Sorrowsworn regains hit points, the Sorrowsworn gains 2 benefits until the end of its next turn. Has advantage on attack rolls, and its bite deals an extra 4d10 necrotic damage on a hit. So, if you if you have a cleric or paladin or some other caster that is using spells, or if somebody uses a potion to heal in combat, then then this guy is going to get advantage on attack rolls, and its bite is going to deal an extra 4d10 necrotic damage. So it makes one bite attack, one claw attack. The bite attack is +8. Hit is 1d8 +4 piercing plus 3d8 necrotic. And then if that healing, it's +3d8 and +4d10 necrotic. So that makes the idea there is it's unless you are dealing an incredible amount of healing damage, you're probably going to be worse off if you've been healed and then if this thing bites you. Because it's probably going to take away all those points you got healed and deal more damage on top of that. So the claw attack is +8 to hit, reach 10 feet, 4d6 +4 slashing damage, and if it's a medium or smaller, it's grappled, and it's restrained until the grapple ends. While grappling a creature, the Sorrowsworn can't make a claw attack. Now, notice that it does not deal additional damage to grappled opponents, except presumably by just holding them there and biting them. Right, so then we have the Lonely Sorrowsworn. Armor class 16, 112 hit points. Again, strength and con are the primary stats here. CR of 9. Psychic Leech. At the start of each of the Sorrowsworn's turns, each creature within 5 feet must succeed on a DC 15 Wisdom save or take 10 psychic damage. Thrives on company. Has advantage on attack rolls while it's within 30 feet of at least 2 other creatures. Otherwise has disadvantage on attack rolls. So, if you are fighting one of these and you all gather around to attack it, hey, if the entire party is around, it's getting advantage on all of its attack rolls. So, multi-attack, it makes one harpoon arm attack and uses Sorrowful Embrace. So melee weapon attack +7 with a reach of 60 feet. So it can just extend that arm out and hit something within 60 feet. Deals 48 +3 piercing damage, and the target is grappled if it is large or smaller. Sorrowsworn has 2 harpoon arms and can grapple up to 2 creatures at once. And then Sorrowful Embrace. Each creature grappled by the Sorrowsworn must make a DC 15 Wisdom save, taking 18 psychic damage on a failed save, half as much on a successful one. In either case, Sorrowsworn pulls each of those creatures up to 30 feet straight towards it. So it shoots out those arms and then pulls the creatures back in toward it. And the closer they get, hey, the more it gets advantage on those attacks. Right. Then we have the Lost Sorrowsworn. Armor class 15, hit point 78, CR 7. Strength and con are once again the primary stats here. Multi-attack makes 2 arm spike attacks. So melee weapon attack +6, reach of 10 feet, 2d10 +3 piercing damage. Then Embrace on a recharge of 4 to 6. Melee weapon attack, reach 5 feet, deals 20 or 4d10 +3 piercing damage, and the target is grappled. If it's a medium or smaller creature until the grapple ends, the target is frightened and takes 68 psychic damage at the end of each of its turns. Sorrowsworn can grapple only 1 creature at a time. In the Tightening Embrace, the Sorrowsworn takes damage. The creature grappled by the embrace takes an additional 4d8 psychic damage. So these are really cool monsters because when you're in combat with them, being in combat against them deals additional damage to your party members or gives them advantage on their attacks. So this is an incredible incredibly fun set of monsters that you can use as a DM to just sort of, it's something that your players, if they're really paying attention, they think, what the heck is making this stuff happen? All right, and then Wretched Sorrowsworn. Armor class 15, 10 hit points, CR 1/4. And, pretty much bad stats. Dex is the only thing that's above average, everything else is below average. Wretched Pack Tactics. Sorrowsworn has advantage on an attack roll against a creature if at least one of a Sorrowsworn's allies is within 5 feet and the ally isn't incapacitated. Otherwise, it has disadvantage on attack rolls. It makes a bite attack +3 to hit, 1d10 +1 piercing damage, and the Sorrowsworn attaches to the target. While attached, the Sorrowsworn can attack, and at the start of each of the Sorrowsworn's turns, the target takes 1d10 +1 necrotic damage. Attached Sorrowsworn moves to the target whenever the target moves, requiring none of the Sorrowsworn's movement. The Sorrowsworn can detach itself by spending 5 feet of its movement on its turn. A creature, including the target, can use its action to detach the Sorrowsworn. So they are small creatures, they're not tiny. So they're presumably the size of gnomes or something like that. All right, so you're getting some ideas out there, DMs, getting some interesting thoughts about the way you might use these monsters in your campaigns. All right, let's go ahead and let's go back to our slides here. Okay, so how could we use an angry Sorrowsworn in encounters? So I could go through for all of these, but I'm just going to do one as an example. That'll give you an idea of maybe how you could retune the other ones. So Angry Sorrowsworn is a CR13 monster, and if we're going to throw one of these at a party of 5 PCs, how could we make a hard challenge out of it? So if our party is level 8 through 10, it's a hard encounter with just the Sorrowsworn alone. If the party is 11 or 12, it's a medium encounter. And if we want to make it a hard encounter for a level 12 party, we can add a Wretched Sorrowsworn to the encounter. And then if the party is level 13 through 17, it's an easy encounter. If we want to make it a hard encounter for a level 17 party, you can add a second Angry Sorrowsworn to the encounter. So that, and then of course, you could build encounters that include several different kinds of these Sorrowsworn, and like have an angry Sorrowsworn and a lonely, or an angry and a hungry Sorrowsworn, or an angry and a lonely, or uh, some of these others. All right, player tactics versus an angry Sorrowsworn. So don't attack it. Attacking the angry Sorrowsworn gives it advantage on its attack rolls and deals additional psychic damage. If it doesn't take a damage from another creature between its turns, it gets disadvantage on its attack rolls. So find a way to damage it without using attacks. And that's the key word, because remember, a lot of these terms in Dungeons and Dragons, there's a mechanical effect. So don't use an attack roll. Doesn't. If it's not an attack roll, if it's an effect that deals damage, that's not necessarily an attack roll. Right. So then don't charm it. So the Angry Sorrowsworn has 2 heads, so it resists all kinds of mind-affecting conditions, such as being blinded, charmed, deafened, frightened, stunned, or knocked unconscious. And then use Bright Light. The Angry Sorrowsworn has resistance to bludgeoning, piercing, and slashing damage if it can remain in dim light or in darkness. And once again, this is a picture of our Sorrowsworn Demon from 3rd edition. So now if you're behind the screen and you're wanting to throw Angry Sorrowsworn at your players, attack from darkness. So Angry Sorrowsworn is not a particularly tactical monster, but it is clever. Let it use shadows and darkness to its advantage to try to ambush the party. Then also use insults. So rely on the older lore of the monster and insult the PCs based on their backstories. You want to goad the PCs into attacking every round so that the Angry Sorrowsworn keeps getting advantage on its attacks. Now, a strong note here, very careful note here. This relies on you and your players having a strong relationship and having a strong understanding of the difference between the monster's relations to the PCs and the DM's relation to the players. So be careful if you're going to use insults against the PCs. Be careful that your players are mature enough and that you and your players have had the discussion and that everybody at the table understands that the monster is insulting the PC and not that you as the DM are insulting the player. It's very clear, or it's very necessary to keep that separated, because people do get emotionally attached to their characters, and if there's things that happen, they can sometimes uh, fall into the trap of taking things a little bit too personally. And as the DM, you always want to be watching for signs that um, that somebody is feeling like the person are being attacked, as opposed to their character is getting attacked by the monster. And if that ever happens, you need to um, call a timeout, have a discussion, make sure everybody understands, make sure everybody's on board with this, and clear that air so that you don't have feelings of resentment that maybe the player thinks now, for whatever reason, you don't like them as a player. All right. Um, then also, if you're going to throw an Angry Sorrowsworn at your players, show no mercy. Angry Sorrowsworn don't negotiate, they don't have pity, they don't have remorse. They don't show any mercy. Just lash out with your inner rage and a reckless assault on anything that isn't the Sorrowsworn. All right, so that is some tactics that you can use. All right, now where would you find Sorrowsworn? In some ways, we have to kind of go back to older editions. According to the 4E lore, Sorrowsworn are important denizens of the Shadowfell. They also inhabit places of great tragedy and sorrows, battlefields, orphanages, and hospitals. Why orphanages? Well, I mean, if you think about it, who lives in an orphanage? Orphans, kids who have lost their parents. So there's naturally a lot of sorrow there. And orphans are oftentimes, in fiction and sadly in real life, they can be targets for abuse. I mean, you think about all of the horror stories about kids in the foster system. So, uh, these orphans can be can have really sad, really tough lives. So that's why you might see these monsters associated with those kinds of locations. Now, in an urban setting, a Sorrowsworn might appear in the wake of a natural or magical plague of some kind. I know for some people that's a topic in your games that might be a little bit too soon for some players, but depending on what your gaming group is all about, or if you're watching this in 10 years, hello, future people, then the COVID-19 of 2020, 2021 could be a distant memory by that time. So uh, you might have, it might be not such a horrible thing to have something about a natural or magical plague affecting your campaign world. So if you are running a campaign that has elements of gothic horror, Sorrowsworn might be found in a haunted house or the ruins of a castle where some long forgotten traumatic tragedy took place. Maybe it was, um, maybe it was a castle where the duke or the count or the king or the queen or whoever was there went mad and murdered a bunch of people. And now, that place is haunted. And one of the manifestations of all that sorrow and anger and sadness and loneliness is Sorrowsworn. So Sorrowsworn also might be assassins sent by the Raven Queen. Again, lore from older editions. So maybe there's some NPC the party knows that has cheated death, and now one or more of these monsters are prowling about, waiting for a chance to strike and set the balance of the books of life and death back in order. Uh, that could possibly be a powerful noble. Maybe there's a powerful noble that's the ruler of the uh, the duchy or the county where your characters are based. And maybe because your characters are heroes, they have cultivated a good relationship with this NPC. And now maybe there's some serious um, nonsense going around. And it seems like this particular ruler's life is in danger. Um, Maybe the PCs are called out to go investigate it. Maybe they start investigating, and maybe they realize that there's a Sorrowsworn. So they start trying to figure out what this monster is. And they go and they investigate, and they realize, wait a minute, these guys show up when somebody's cheated death. Now that's something maybe they can get into the backstory of that ruler. Oh, when that ruler was young, that ruler was supposed to die, but maybe they did something diabolical so that somebody else died in their place. And now the Raven Queen is coming to set the accounts right. So now then that introduces some intrigue into the campaign. Oh, well, do we want to help this person who's been our ally all this time, or now that we know that there's some shady shenanigans in this person's backstory, maybe we don't feel the same way about them? Right. So, of course, if your campaign is set in the Shadowfell, then you can have these creatures appear wherever it seems appropriate, because they're going to be just all over the place. Um, they're wandering around like so many goblins or orcs. All right, and then we can look at how we might reskin Sorrowsworn. So there are creatures that reflect the various emotions of fear and sorrow in the Shadowfell, similar to the way that screaming devilkin are created by outbursts of panic or fear in the Feywild. So you can look at different emotions represented by the Sorrowsworn and imagine what they would be like in other planes of existence. So, what would elemental creatures that embody anger, hunger, fear, being lost, loneliness, and general wretchedness be like in the elemental plane of air, or water, or earth, or fire? What would that be like? Imagine, imagine a lonely Sorrowsworn in the elemental plane of fire would reach out with tendrils of flame to grasp and pull a creature in and just wrap it in living flame. Just burn it to a crisp. Okay. So for that matter, what would these creatures embodying these emotions be like in the Feywild? So maybe vines would spring up and grapple and pull these creatures in, or in the Underdark, all kinds of crazy places. Now, thinking about IPs outside of D&D, in the Mists of Pandaria expansion for World of Warcraft, there were monsters called the Shah. And there were 6 of these greater Shah that represented the emotions of doubt, despair, violence, anger, hatred, and fear. And if you are running a D&D campaign that's kind of set in sort of an Oriental Adventures theme, you might create spirit monsters like the Shah, but mechanically, you could underpin them with the stat blocks of the Sorrowsworn. So now these are just a few different options, and I'm sure with a little brainstorming and thinking about your own campaign setting and where it might be appropriate to put something like this, you could come up with several other different versions that you would use in your own homebrew. And if you think about those, if you're watching over on the archives on YouTube, go ahead down in the comment section and tell me what some of your reskinning options of Sorrowsworn might look like. I'd be curious to see um, how you might repurpose these and make them, take them out of the Shadowfell and mechanically change things like their damage types and things like that to put them in a homebrew setting of your own. All right, it's time for the Q&A. At this point, I don't think we have any questions in the uh, in the chat. All right, well, thank you guys all for coming and hanging out. I'm going to go ahead and go over here. I'm going to go into the wrap up, and then we will come back and look and see if there are any additional questions. All right, I have been DM Galabon. This has been Monster Monday, and tonight's episode has been all about the Sorrowsworn. We have several other campaigns, all of which are on hiatus this week. So this is the only live stream of the week. Midweek for the Wednesday night game, there is a soccer match for US Open Cup, so I will be attending that match. We won't have a game. And then here in the United States, this coming weekend is Memorial Day weekend. That's typically a time where a lot of families travel. There's lots of get-togethers, all kinds of things. That's going to disrupt the Friday night game. It's going to disrupt the Sunday afternoon game. And everybody will be off on Monday. Now, I know the Venn diagram sometimes of interests doesn't always overlap, but if you are a fan of D&D who is also a fan of auto racing, then one of the high holy days of the calendar is coming up this Sunday, where you can have breakfast watching Monaco Grand Prix, lunch watching the Indy 500, and dinner while you watch the stock car race in Charlotte. So kill the entire day Sunday that way in front of the TV if you wish. All right. Like I said, our games are on hiatus, but normally they're Sunday at 2 p.m., Wednesday 8 p.m., and Saturday night at 7:30. All of the streams are live on Twitch, and all the archives for Monster Monday are on YouTube. Now, this past week, I did a live stream on Friday night with my first impressions of the Monsters of the Multiverse. That will be up on the archives on YouTube shortly, along with the archives of this show. And we do have a Patreon, so if there is any, if you want to help us out, you can throw a few bucks our way over there on the Patreon, and that'll help us create more content. And next week, we have a viewer request. Had a request to do a Monster Monday on Eamon the Wolf, which is a very interesting creature that I hope you guys will enjoy. After we finish Eamon the Wolf, we will go back, finish out our creatures for Monster Monday, and then Monster Monday is going to change a little bit after we finish out the Strixhaven. After we finish out the Strixhaven monsters. All right. Take care, everyone. Have a wonderful evening. And as always, watch out for the monsters under the bed. Good night, everybody.